The densely forested Barrow, Colorado island sits in the middle of Lake Gatun, which forms a substantial chunk of the Panama Canal, and is home to a world-renowned tropical research center run by the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, STRI. Why such forests are so rich in species is one of the perennial questions in ecology. Their biodiversity outstrips all other major ecosystems, and the 6 square miles of Barrow, Colorado are surely, with the possible exception of Whiteham Wood near Oxford, the most intensively studied, most picked over, most analysed, most binocular scanned, most mapped square miles of forest in the world. What a privilege to be invited there for a month. At the time of my visit, Ira Rubinoff, the director of STRI in Panama, who originally invited me, was going on sabbatical leave, leaving the institute in the capable and genial hands of his deputy, my old friend Michael Robinson. Mike and I had been fellow graduate students of Nico Tinbergen at Oxford in the 1960s. He was a little older than the rest of us, having gone back to university as a mature student to indulge his passion for entomology, after what some, not I, might consider a misspent youth as a left-wing agitator. At that stage of his life, British troops were fighting insurgents in Malaya, and Mike once spent a whole night rushing around the streets of Manchester, painting slogans on wall after wall after wall. "Hands off Malaya! Hands off Malaya! Hands off Malaya!" Dawn came, and he prepared to crawl off to bed, unarrested and with a good feeling of a night well spent, and Manchester well and truly taught a lesson. He looked up at his final daub with a sigh of satisfaction, and noticed to his horror that it said, "Hands of Malaya." He didn't need to go back to check his earlier handiwork. A sinking hindsight told him that all his slogans throughout the night contained the same slip, mechanically repeated from the first one. When, after completing an excellent doctoral thesis on stick insects at Oxford, Mike was offered a job at STRI, his officially organised itinerary to Panama took him via Miami. Because he had once been a member of the Communist Party, the US authorities refused to grant him a visa to touch down in Miami, even though he would never leave the airport's secure area, and in spite of the fact that his fully agreed salary in Panama was to be paid by the US government. Stalemate. I forget how it was resolved, but he did eventually make it to Panama. All must later have been comprehensively forgiven, or at least officially forgotten, because he eventually rose to become director of the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., one of the most famous zoos in the world. At the time of my visit to Panama, he was accepted enough to be acting director of STRI, and was still exactly as I remembered him, that rosily beaming face with its little red goatee and matching apical tuft on the top of the head. A young woman in Oxford seeking to establish which one he was in a group had once whispered to me, "Is he the one with the little beard?" while her accompanying hand gesture cheekily indicated the top of the head. My guide when I arrived in Panama was another old friend from Oxford days, Fritz Vollrath, the Spider-Man. If Mike Robinson was cheerful, Fritz is world-class cheerful, but with none of the negative connotations of the life and soul of the party, more the life and soul of everyday life itself. I first encountered his quizzically laughing eyes when he arrived in Oxford from Germany to work as a teenage slave in the Tinbergen group. He was introduced by the wildly brilliant Juan Delius, his cousin, who was at that time a leading member of the group. Fritz immediately fitted in, laughing at his own broken English even more than the rest of us did. When I met him again in Panama years later, he had scarcely changed. His English was much better, and his Spanish didn't seem at all bad either. We drove around the environs of Panama City, pausing to watch a sloth as it slowly descended from a tree for its weekly defecation. We climbed a peak in Darien, alas, not the very one where, as I murmured to myself, stout Cortes with his eagle eyes silently stared at the Pacific, and all his men looked at each other with a wild surmise. Fritz was based in Panama City, while I was bound for Barrow, Colorado, in the interior of the country, but it was a delight to see him for just that one day. He is now back in Oxford, close friend and distinguished authority on spiders, their behaviour, and the unparalleled